we arrived in France, we were handed over to the police.
And what was happening in Nkrumah's time was a sense of pride in being African, a sense of purpose about liberating the continent and about developing it. That has disappeared. It's about survival.
How did you find this community? How did you find Ghanaians?
What really struck me about hearing Clinton's story from your documentary film was that we have become, to a certain extent, desensitized to the individual story.
Why would people, young people, want to leave their country with all these natural resources and walk through the desert and go over ships and come into cages in Europe? What for? This question is not being answered by the Ghanaian authorities, neither is it being answered by their European counterparts, who are the people pulling all the levers about international trade.
I know that there is always a face to the numbers. I know that there's always a story behind policy. But I think what I learned is that is this man's story, Clinton, right? I learned his story. It's unique to him. But it also, not that it's universally applicable, but there are many, many stories like that, and shining the light on those types of stories helps us to reconnect with that human face.
So you've come here, you don't have jobs. You have jobs?
No.
You sleep on the streets?
Okay.
You're sleeping on the streets?
Yes.
You're sleeping on the streets of France?
Yes, France here.
Thank you very much, Davina, for another brilliant documentary. The problem as I see it is one of underdevelopment and lack of leadership. When my parents came here in the 1950s, and the time came for them to go back to Ghana, they were offered British passports, and they refused them.
When you see these pictures, how do you feel?
When I look at it, it pains me deeply. But what can I do? God is with me.
So I think it's quite interesting having to differentiate between economic migrants, people who travel from other countries for work, and those that travel to escape atrocities, for example, or become refugees. Creating that distinction between the two, I think that would quite be difficult.
Yeah, serious prayers. We are three, so we held hands and prayed.
You brought out very important issues. What I would say is that I was just a little disappointed at Clinton, just to say that he's gone through a lot after he left Ghana, and he could have been killed. He's now in Paris, doesn't have a place to lay his head, he doesn't have a job, and yet he doesn't seem to think that going to Ghana might be an improvement.
Even though it's like I know these things happen, I think somehow I feel like it happens to other Africans who are having a harder life than Ghanaians are having.
I know that Ghana is not, what shall I say, people have challenges there, but there are so many opportunities in Ghana as well.
In the West, we see an immigrant arrive illegally, and we look at, kind of from now going forward, what should we do? But I think your story kind of enabled a viewer to really understand the reasons behind why is he here? Does he really want to be here, or is he, was this a last resort for him? And you captured that story, I think, very well. Although I wanted to see his face and his eyes as he told the story, I thought it was very, very touching to just know, the details of the hardship for many, many years.
In our discussion afterward, we talked about internally displaced people. We talked about what is an economic refugee or migrant versus a political refugee.
And what really struck me about hearing Clinton's story from your documentary film was that we have become, to a certain extent, desensitized to the individual story. We're really familiar in the UK with the with the story of migrants. And we become familiar with statistics, and we've become familiar with the countries who seem to be dealing with those influxes, certainly across the Mediterranean.
If the reports that we're receiving are right, Ghanaians in the diaspora are sending home about $5 billion every year. And so when the people on the ground see that their brothers and sisters in the diaspora are doing so well, they do not believe these stories that you can't do well in the diaspora. Of course you can do well in the diaspora. And my circle of people are all professionals. And so to tell us that you can't do well in the diaspora just doesn't add up.
I'd like to just thank you for showcasing this to us. I thought it was very thought-provoking just to be able to understand Clinton's story and how he went from Ghana to France. However, what I found to be really interesting is that even through everything he went through and being in France, he's currently homeless, no job, no food, has no future prospects whatsoever.
It gives you a chance to multiply his story up by thousands and tens of thousands to understand there are so many other people out there that have experienced what he's experienced.
It was good to hear it from the grassroots itself, and a lot of the time, like a lot of people have mentioned, you always hear about the Western media. Again, them seeing African migrants as a threat, so it was really good to hear it from their perspective, to hear, what happens on the ground. What was quite striking to me was, he went through so many things, but also after all that, when it came to would you end up going back home, he was like, there was a bit of a pause, so you can see there's still that hesitancy.
And when rhetoric and language is being used in a community about whether we will allow these types of people and what do we do and how do we answer this problem, having a story to connect with the issue oftentimes helps us to make more compassionate choices around that.
I think my main takeaway was the fact that finding African solutions to African problems, I think oftentimes we look towards the West to sort of bring aid or to sort of try and alleviate us from our issues. And I think we as an African continent need to collaborate ideas, resources, and see how we can put pressure on our leaders to be able to make life in Africa better for us and worth living.
The conversation that we need to have is an honest conversation with our people back at home. That yes, there are opportunities in this part of the world, but the other side of that coin is what you're showing in your documentary. The other side of that coin is the house helps in Saudi Arabia and other parts of the Arab world who are being used as sex slaves, beaten, killed, and then their bodies sent home to Ghana. We need to have a balanced conversation and tell people the story as it is. Place it in its historical context.
Individuals seeking a better life, frankly, and is it freedom from poverty? Is it freedom from violence or oppression or imprisonment? And I think that governments hold a responsibility to manage immigration into their country appropriately.
The African leaders need to take responsibility. I mean, when Africa has problems, I don't expect Europe to solve them. I think it would be irresponsible to think that, if there are problems in your home, I don't think you are waiting for me. You might ask me for help, but it's under your direction. I don't come to your home and tell you what to do, but you can see a way in which I can help, and you'd say that, oh, please, could you come and do these specific things for me? So I think that yes, African leaders need to step up, do a bit more, because as somebody said in a contribution, when his parents were offered European passport, they didn't want it. My father studied here, was at university here. When he was offered a British passport, no thank you.
In 1976, Nigeria was earning £114 million a day from oil. Why would a country like Nigeria allow its citizens come to Europe for what?
And you need to address the lack of vision. And I think also what the lady said, I would agree that it is our leaders who sign deals. But what my point is, leaders who put their people first and their country first do not survive. And it is until we, the people, are prepared to stand up for our leaders who do right, we will continue to have the thieves surviving.
For say
Me, if God said today, your time is up, then
It did strike me, not only because his statement came at the end of such a harrowing story, but that his statement was so affirmative as well. There was no hesitation. At no point did he say, my faith was shaken. At no point did he say, I lost my faith. Everything was, this is happening for a reason, and it is part of something bigger than me. And if I had gone through what he had gone through, I don't know if my faith would have come through as intact as his did.